A very good afternoon and welcome everyone to our webinar, Taking Action on Nature, Practical Insights from Asian Businesses, co-hosted by Business for Nature and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And my name is Pallavi Kalita. I'm the Asia lead for Business for Nature, and it is my absolute pleasure to be hosting today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. As you can see on the agenda, we'll be hearing from industry experts and businesses based in Asia on the credible steps that businesses can adopt to address the nature crisis in the region. In the first 30 minutes, we will explore why nature action is critical for businesses, what are the practical steps businesses can adopt to start or advance their nature journey, and we will also share some insights from our recently concluded Asia survey. This will be followed by a discussion with three leading companies, Olam Food Ingredients, TCC Group Holdings, and the Mahindra Group, who will share about their nature journey. And this discussion will be moderated by our co-host, WBCST. This will be followed by a short Q&A session. And before we proceed with our agenda today, just a few housekeeping rules. If you have any questions for any of the speakers as the webinar progresses, please make use of the Q&A box that you can see in your toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And there will also be a few Zoom polls coming up shortly, so please do respond to that. And now, without taking up any more time, let me invite our first speaker, Eva Zabe, CEO of Business for Nature, to share with us why businesses need to pay attention to nature and why now. Eva, over to you.
Thanks so much, Pallavi. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm seeing in the chat people joining in from all over the region and in fact all over the world, and I'm just really thrilled. We're thrilled to have so many of you join. I'm the CEO of Business for Nature. We're a global coalition, and together as the voice of leading business, we drive business action and policy ambition towards a nature-positive economy for all by 2030. And to kick off, there were really two questions. Why nature? Why should business care about nature? And why now? What's the urgency? Today, we're going to talk about the long-term resilience and the continued success of companies, and the fact that that depends fundamentally on a healthy planet, and businesses have an exceptionally important role to ensure that we halt and reverse nature loss. And why is that? Because every single business from every sector, every geography, every size, all of you on the call fundamentally depend on nature. In fact, the whole economy depends on nature. About half of the GDP, half of the world's GDP, $58 trillion per year, is moderately or highly dependent on nature and its services. Businesses rely on things like freshwater, energy, raw materials, crops and fish, tourism, ecosystem services such as climate regulation and freshwater purification to produce all the goods and services. If you think about it, every food or fashion industry fundamentally relies on pollination and pest control and healthy soils to grow the crops that they need. A hydropower company that has forests above their reservoirs will fundamentally depend on the natural service of erosion control that these forests provide to avoid sedimentation that reduces energy production. But businesses also impact on nature and contribute to its loss. In fact, we're losing nature at such a fast rate that it's at a tipping point. Businesses are extracting resources 1.75 times faster than nature can replenish them. And 90% of man-made pressure on nature comes from our need for food, energy, infrastructure, and fashion. And of course, that's a recent study that estimates that, but it also helps us focus the mind and our action. Nature loss is affecting our global economy. Ecosystem degradation could lead to GDP losses of up to $2.7 trillion annually in 2030. So we're moving from understanding the economic value of nature and how important it is to then needing to prepare ourselves for seeing these impacts materialize in financial flows as they are already in different parts of the world, including Asia. Because Asia is more exposed, in fact, to the collapse of the natural world than many other regions. And probably those on the line, you know this better than I do. The risk of disruption posed by biodiversity and nature loss could impact up to 63% of Asia Pacific's GDP. And that's because of the strong dependence of the regional economy on natural capital. In fact, if you look at the top 100 cities globally that face the largest environmental risks, guess how many are in Asia Pacific? 99. 99 are in Asia Pacific. And all of this will have direct consequences for businesses, affecting operations, supply chains, overall business continuity. Well, for example, just think of what the impact of disruptions in freshwater supply would have on your business performance. And maybe you unfortunately don't need to even think about it because you have experienced this already. But thankfully, despite geopolitical headwinds in some parts of the world, nature is actually rising on the political and regulatory agenda. And that's also driving business action. So first, the Global Biodiversity Framework. You'll hear quite a bit about this maybe later on, reference to the Global Biodiversity Framework. Well, at the end of 2022, in December, 196 countries achieved something that was truly historic at the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD. This was a meeting of the governments, and together they adopted the ambitious Global Biodiversity Framework. And you can think of this as the Paris Climate Agreement equivalent for nature. The framework brings together all parts of society, and business has a super important role to play, so does finance, as well as all parts of society. And it brings everyone together around a global nature positive goal to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. It includes a very specific target called Target 15, which calls on businesses to assess and disclose their impacts, risks, and dependencies, as well as take action to address nature loss. And countries are now implementing the Global Biodiversity Framework at a national level. And so businesses can expect changes in regulations and political direction, and they need to start getting ready for that now. Also, just as a follow-up meeting, the first meeting after this agreement was adopted just last year in Colombia at COP16, it's called, we saw 6 heads of state attend the CBD conference and many finance ministers as well. And that was really the first time that we've seen biodiversity and nature be so high on that political agenda. Second, in terms of these drivers, and we also see some regulatory pressure already emerging in the EU, despite some recent calls for watering down some of the regulation. The core policies are there. For example, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Disclosure, CSRD, and that requires companies to disclose information on their nature and biodiversity impacts. And that will also impact companies in Asia and elsewhere that have large operations in the EU. So it goes beyond the borders of the EU. In Asia as well, we're seeing some repercussions of emerging regulatory pressure. For example, in Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Beijing stock exchanges are now proposing mandatory disclosure requirements covering climate change and biodiversity starting in 2026, and that's for more than 400 listed companies. Third, there's an increasing expectation from investors, and that we're also seeing that trend evolve with over 15 Asian investors, including Nomura, Sumitomo, ADM Capital, that have joined PRI's Spring Nature Initiative. And that really aims to mobilize global investors to engage continuously with companies on biodiversity and nature loss. A lot of what investors need to know is, what should we be asking the companies that we're investing in to make sure we fully understood our indirect impacts, but also opportunities. And then fourth is, of course, the consumer pressure. So we're seeing more and more consumers now wanting to purchase responsibly, especially in younger parts of the population. There's also peer pressure. We're seeing a momentum here where, for example, over 500 companies now from 50 countries have agreed to become early adopters for the TNFD, which is the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. So all of these points just point to the fact that business as usual is not an option for the region. Things are moving, there is an urgency to act, and the negative impacts of business activities on nature will trigger negative business consequences, such as losing customers, talent, or entire markets. And it may also, down the line, incur costly legal action. But all of this is a bit doom and gloom, and that wasn't the idea, in that actually the nature crisis and being able to tackle it properly is such an opportunity. It's an opportunity to innovate, to transform, for businesses to start shifting their business models, to contribute to being part of the solution rather than part of the problem. In fact, the World Economic Forum estimates that nature-positive business opportunities in the Asia-Pacific region could generate $4.3 trillion annually, and over 230 million jobs annually by 2030. So I think all of this just means that nature is and will increasingly be everyone's business. It's now higher on the business agenda than ever before. And to stay competitive, businesses must act now. So we need far more companies to take action. And that also means including raising their voice for policy ambitions so we can change the system as well and recognize good performance. So that was a bit of an overview, and I'm going to hand over to Michael in a second. But before I do, we wanted to ask you two Zoom poll questions, which hopefully have now popped up on your screen. The first one is nature a priority for your company? And we have yes, somewhat, or no. And the second question is, do you know what actions your company can take on nature? Because you may already be taking action. You may know what to do, but you haven't started to take action yet. So can you please vote now? I can't see the results coming in, but I was going to do a live commentary of how the results were coming in. But I'm not, so let's see. Let's give it just 10 more seconds. Quickly get your votes in. Let's see, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see the results. Hopefully you can share the results on the screen. Hopefully all of you can see this. So is nature a priority for the company? Yes, 57% saying yes, and only 7% saying no. So we're in a good place for you, Michael, to take this away. And for do you know what actions your company can take on nature? Excellent to see that the majority, 63, already are taking action, and that we do have an important part of the group here today that would like to learn more. So this is a perfect segue to you, Michael. So it's really my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce Michael Ofosuene-Wise, who is the Senior Manager at Business for Nature, who's going to take you through what actions you can take. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Eva. I must admit, that countdown really felt like the countdown to 2030, signaling the urgency with which we must all act to contribute. Thank you once again, and hello, everyone. I am really delighted to be part of today's discussion. Eva has just taken us through why nature is important to business. And now the question we have is, what can businesses do? I'll take a few minutes to outline the key steps businesses can take to accelerate nature action and highlight some resources to support you on this journey. All businesses must act immediately to help reverse nature loss. to coordinate business action efforts, and to have a consistent approach to accelerate nature action, leading organizations, as you see on the screen, have developed the high-level business actions on nature, asking businesses to assess, commit, transform, and disclose, also known as Act D. And I want to spell out Act D because you'll hear it a few more times within this discussion. All businesses need to start by acknowledging the value of nature to their business by assessing and measuring their impacts and dependencies on nature. So that's the assess. Based on these assessments, companies should commit by setting science-based targets and transform their business models, operations, as well as advocate for policy ambition. Finally, companies should disclose material nature-related information to all key stakeholders. Across each stage of Act D, there's been a plethora of guidance that has been released in the past years to support companies to complete these actions. And later today, we'll hear from 3 companies on how the adoption of the Act D actions have supported their nature journey. To help demonstrate the global momentum, we launched the It's Now for Nature campaign, a joint global campaign in November 2023 to bring together all businesses to act on nature and contribute towards a nature-positive world by 2030. The campaign encourages businesses and financial institutions to develop, publish an ambitious nature strategy that will enable them to make meaningful contributions towards a nature-positive world. We believe that a credible nature strategy will lead to credible business action. As part of the campaign, we developed a nature strategy handbook, as you see on the screen, which is a practical step-by-step guide to support businesses to develop a nature strategy. My colleagues will share a link of this resource in the chats very shortly. The handbook builds on Act D to assess, commit, transform, and disclose, and it provides a high-level overview of the key components of a credible nature strategy, including guiding questions that companies can ask themselves, recommendations, and practical resources to help them through this journey. It is available in 6 different languages, including Japanese and Simple Chinese, and draws on work from many partners, including TNFD, as Eva mentioned earlier, the Capitals Coalition, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, who we'll be hearing from also very shortly in this discussion. By building on all these available resources and requirements, the nature strategy provides a common direction for all businesses to begin or continue their nature journey towards a nature-positive future. And from the poll, we could see that a lot of you have either started taking action or at the beginning of your journey, and this will be a very useful resource to help you think strategically around nature action. To date in the campaign, we have over 30 nature strategies that have been accepted and published on the It's Now for Nature website. 3 of them are from Asia, and thankfully, we have 2 of these companies here with us today who will share their insights on the journey. A fantastic milestone, which we hope will inspire all of you. All the information about this campaign is available on nowfornature.org. If you are interested, kindly download the handbook to get started and explore published nature strategies, which are on the website. We expect that through these discussions, we will see many more coming to join the campaign in the next months, and hopefully more companies from Asia will be part of this growing momentum. And if your company already has a nature strategy, we call on you and encourage you to submit it to be part of this important initiative. Lastly, I would like to share another resource, which I believe is particularly helpful for companies at the beginning of their nature strategy to understand how they interface with nature. Business for Nature, along with the World Economic Forum and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, developed what we call the sector actions towards a nature-positive future. For 14 key industry sectors, these guides highlight what are the key impacts, the key dependencies of a sector, and based on these, we've prioritized the top actions businesses within those sectors can take to contribute towards a nature-positive future. Each sector has a short overview as well as a long deep dive report, which expand on these impacts, dependencies, and sectors, and can provide very practical insights that will help you prioritize actions on nature. You can find all this content on the Business for Nature website, and I encourage you all to have a look as you begin to identify and implement relevant, impactful actions for nature. So on this note, I would like to say thank you very much, and I hope all of you will find these resources useful. Next, we would like to share insights and surveys from the surveys that explore the current state of nature action among business in Asia. We'll present findings from 2 surveys. One, providing a global perspective, which will be presented by Martina Beshparova. She's a consultant from natural capital and nature at McKinsey, and then followed by my colleague Pallavi Kalita, our Asia leader, Business for Nature, will briefly touch upon some of the key drivers influencing business action in the region. And with that, I'm very pleased to welcome Martina. Over to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael, and a very good afternoon to everyone. First of all, thank you for taking the time to join this very exciting session. As Michael said, my name is Martina, and I'm part of the McKinsey Nature and Natural Capital Service line. Over the next 5 minutes or so, I will guide you through what are the Asian businesses already doing in the nature space or the evolution of corporate nature commitments. And this is based on the analysis of publicly available data from Fortune Global 500 companies over the past 3 years. First, to set the stage, let's first look at the global landscape. Echoing what Eva said at the beginning, what we can see is that global momentum on nature is growing. Around the globe, companies are not just making commitments on nature, they're strengthening and evolving them. And as you can see, the majority of organizations have set targets in at least one of the 6 environmental dimensions that we have analyzed and which you can see on the right-hand side of the slide. What is particularly notable is the increasing level of sophistication. A growing number of companies are also setting targets that span across 2, 3, or even more dimensions, signaling the shift towards a more integrated approach to nature. However, there are also some regional disparities in the scale and pace of the nature transition. European companies lead, likely driven by policies such as the CCRD and the Nature Restoration Law. But at the same time in Asia, despite being home to some of the world's most critical biodiversity hotspots, their companies trail behind in setting comparable commitments. And this is why forums like the one today are actually quite important, because they can serve as platforms for sharing best practices and accelerating corporate nature action. Moving on to the next slide and focusing on Asia specifically, Pallavi will also just briefly discuss this, but CO2 does remain the primary focus of corporate nature targets, and that's the dark blue at the bottom of the charts, with just above 60% of companies setting a target in this area. Carbon is followed by water and chemical and plastic targets, but as you can see, they remain 5 to 6 times lower than proportion of CO2 targets. Encouragingly, what we can also see is that the proportion of companies recognizing the importance of each one of the dimensions is growing. We see biodiversity, forestry, and nutrient acknowledgements having a marked growth in recent years, indicating the broader recognition of businesses and society that commitments must go beyond carbon and focus on other broader ecosystems on which we rely. Then moving on to the next slide, where we also have the data broken down by sectors, what we can see is that manufacturing and transport emerges some of the most sophisticated sectors in terms of number of targets, having the highest share of targets of 3 or more targets, 16% and 9% respectively. In terms of absolute numbers, the retail, manufacturing, and agriculture sectors stand out, which is probably unsurprising given their high reliance on nature and natural resources to derive value. One sector breaks the patterns, and that's construction and buildings, where target setting is low, and over 60% of companies have no targets or acknowledgements. This highlights an important gap, but also an opportunity, and that opportunity is for action. That's why today's agenda is particularly exciting, because in addition to insights from companies from some of the front-running sectors such as agriculture and transport, in the face of Alfie and Mahindra, we'll hear from TCC, who also share some insights on action that can be taken in this area. So to summarize, while regional disparities do persist, as we saw on the first slide, Asian companies are making measured but steady progress in advancing corporate commitments to nature. Carbon remains the dominant target, but growing momentum in areas such as biodiversity, forestry, and nutrient acknowledgements is encouraging. And to translate these acknowledgements into targets underpinned by high integrity metrics and impactful initiatives, companies will need to embrace a more comprehensive and multidimensional approach. While the path ahead might seem complex and demanding, sessions like the one today, anchored in business-led insights, can serve as a key stepping stone, embedding nature in operations and value chains, and we're very grateful to be part of these. Thank you, and I'll hand it over to Pallavi, who will bring to life some of the themes through the Asia Business Consultation Survey.
Thank you, Martina, for sharing these insights. It is encouraging to see that the awareness in the region is increasing, and hopefully this increasing awareness will also be translated into more concrete commitments and actions from companies in Asia. At Business for Nature also, we conducted a survey last year to better understand the drivers of nature action in Asia, where 77 companies participated across 10 sectors and more than 10 countries. Geographically, we had the highest responses from India, China, and Japan, and a couple of Southeast Asian countries as well. In terms of sectors, we had the highest responses from built environment and the energy sector, followed by professional services. I'll be sharing very briefly 4 key takeaways from the survey. First, let's take a look at the drivers and challenges of nature action in Asia. But before that, let me quickly flag that the respondents, that is the companies, could choose multiple options as responses to these questions. So what are the drivers of nature action? New market opportunities, meeting investor and consumer demands, and meeting legal and regulatory requirements emerge as the top drivers of nature action in Asia, which also very much aligns with what we heard at the outset in Eva's presentation. What is encouraging is to see that exploring new market opportunities, driving innovation has emerged as one of the top drivers of nature action in Asia, meaning that there is a shift in the narrative from risk mitigation to opportunities that nature positive business models bring in, which is definitely a very encouraging signal. However, if you look at the right side of the slide, a number of barriers such as availability of data, investability, difficulty in locating and quantifying nature risk and dependencies that are material are either slowing down or preventing nature action in Asia. Many companies are also struggling to develop a nature strategy or even to communicate the importance of nature action internally, particularly to their senior leadership. And today we'll hear from the 3 companies how they are addressing some of these challenges. Second takeaway, the understanding of nature is increasing in the region. In fact, around 50% of companies said that they understand their impacts and dependencies very well. More than 35% of the respondents have already assessed their impacts and dependencies on nature, and another 25% are currently in the process of doing so. Third takeaway, over 40% of companies have public reports on their environmental impacts, and another 26% are currently in the process of doing so. Carbon, water, and waste emerge as the key metrics when it comes to nature-related targets. That is, businesses are still very much focusing on traditional areas of environmental sustainability that we also heard in Martina's presentation, which of course is absolutely important in addressing the nature crisis. But what we are missing are targets on other dimensions of nature, such as targets on biodiversity conservation, example, species protection, or regenerative agriculture. And this could be because of a number of challenges that I highlighted earlier. For example, data gaps, standardized methodologies, or simply because of a lack of a clear business case for action. Finally, we also sought to understand what are the factors influencing companies when they set their nature targets. That is, what are the key decision drivers? And we found the nature impact mitigation is primarily driven by ad hoc opportunities. That is, businesses incorporate nature-related considerations when there is an opportunity to do so, rather than being guided by long-term strategies. But it was also encouraging to see that many companies, that is around 35 companies, responded that they set their nature targets based on their maturity assessments, which helped them prioritize their efforts, identifying their key risk, impacts, dependencies, and opportunities. Investor pressure was also highlighted as a steer by many companies. And as we heard in the beginning, many Asian investors are now becoming increasingly serious about nature risk, demanding that businesses integrate nature as part of their decision-making process. So these were the 4 key takeaways that I wanted to share very briefly. Overall, nature momentum is increasing, but we need to remain cognizant of the fact that many challenges do persist. I hope you found these insights useful. It is definitely very useful for organizations such as Business for Nature and many of our coalition partners to help us better tailor our resources and efforts to support corporates in accelerating nature action. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Now let's move on to the next part of our webinar, where we'll hear directly from 3 companies about their nature journey, the challenges they have faced and the kind of strategies they have employed in addressing these challenges, and more importantly, why nature is a priority for their business strategy. And to moderate this conversation, let me invite Angela Graham Brown, Director, Nature Action, WBCSD. Angela, over to you, and we are looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Pallavi. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be with you today to go into the discussion part of the webinar, where we'll be discussing with 3 leading companies active in Asia about how they've aligned their strategies with the ACT-D framework that was introduced a little bit earlier. The discussions will be based on 3 case studies that have been released and that you will be able to find in the chat, but also in the email that will come right after the webinar. If you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll reserve 10 minutes at the end of the discussion to be able to, to go through some of your questions. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce our 3 panelists. So we have Ria Bakshi, who's the Global Head of Sustainability and Accounting and Reporting for Olam Food and Ingredients. Ria, are you with us? Actually, I can't see you on the screen.
Yes, I'm there, Angela. Good morning.
Ah, there you are. Thank you for joining. And then we have Ankit Todi. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer for my Mahindra Group.
Hi,
Hello,
Angela.
Ankit.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for joining. And finally, we have Advin Lay, who's the researcher for the Office of Responsibility and Sustainability at TCC Group Holdings. Advin, welcome. Are you with us?
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for joining. Super. Well, now that we have all 3 of you with us, how about you kick us off by, in turn, telling us a little bit about the motivation behind aligning your nature strategies with the ACT-D framework, and how that alignment has helped you develop your nature strategy and nature journey. Who would like to start? Maybe Ankit, would you like to go first since you're off mute?
Sure. Thank you, Angela. So, let me first start by introducing a little bit about the Mahindra Group, so that everyone's familiar with it, and I resonate with a lot of the things that's already been said over the last 45 minutes or so. So, very quickly, the Mahindra Group is a large federation of companies headquartered in India. We operate in about 20 different industries. So, in whatever I say, I'll sort of bring in different perspectives across industries. So in the manufacturing sector, we play in the auto industry, in the agri industry specifically. We are the world's largest manufacturers of tractors by volume. We have a bunch of other plays in the agri service industry as well. We do rural financing particularly. We are present in the holidays and resorts space as well. There's logistics involved. There's a service industry, which is again finance and renewable energy and IT services, etc. So the broader point that we started doing about 3 years back was that how do you make the entire conversation about climate sustainability, ESG, a bit more business relevant? How do you integrate it with the core strategy of the business? And in that aspect, what we did is that we sort of came up with a strategy called the Planet Positive strategy, and I'll speak about that in subsequent answers as well, which was to integrate and operate all businesses in a manner that they are planet positive. Now, what does that mean? The first pillar that we picked up was that how do we ensure that all the operational aspects of our businesses are taken care of? So not just focusing on emissions, which is often a complaint that you'll see in the biodiversity forum, that companies only talk about emissions. So we made the first pillar definitely about emissions, but also about water and waste, and having a group-wide commitment that we will be 100% water positive. And we have been that since 2014 across the portfolio of businesses we operate in. Then we also made a commitment to becoming 100% zero waste to landfill, that is ensuring no waste goes to landfill. But also going beyond that into areas of circularity, especially material circularity, because a lot of the impacts on nature is driven by how do we consume material and do we play a role in that. So that became the first pillar of our work. I'll skip through the subsequent detail, but one of the other pillars of our work is what we called regenerating nature, where we again picked up 2 or 3 different areas of action. So one of those areas of action was sustainable agriculture. Given that multiple parts of the Mahindra Group engage with the agri ecosystem, how do we create and play a role in creating awareness and helping enable sustainable agriculture, both as an area not just of climate mitigation, but especially from the purview of adaptation. That became a big area of action. We also had a biodiversity conservation program, especially because we own large areas of land within our resorts, within the solar ecosystem that we operate in. So there, following a principle of no harm. So generally speaking, we don't operate in industries that lead to direct harm, such as mining, etc. But we followed a principle of no harm and any compensatory climate action wherever required when it came to the broader ecology that especially in the areas that we own. Let me briefly pause at that.
Thank you, Ankit. We look forward to coming back to Planet Positive in a subsequent question. There's a few areas we'd love to dig into. Alvin, would you like to go next? Would you tell us a little bit about the motivation for TCC Group in aligning with the Active framework?
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to begin with a quick question. Does anybody here know the term sine qua non? It's actually a Latin phrase meaning an essential condition. It means something that we cannot live without. So our chairman, Nelson Anping Zhang, often emphasized that nature is the sine qua non for human existence. It's the foundation of everything. So for us, nature itself is our motivation. And I'm from TCC Group Holdings, Taiwan's leading cement and concrete company. Since 2017, we have been pursuing a low carbon transformation. In the past year, we expanded our cement business into Europe and Turkey as part of our globalization strategy. And today, I would like to focus on the commitment to nature. So in late 2023, we saw Business for Nature introduced the Active framework. Here we want to show big thanks to Business for Nature, by the way. And this high-level business action has provided us with a structured approach to advance our nature actions. So to illustrate, we have adopted the TNFD LEAP approach alongside with Anchor tool to systematically figure out how our operations depend on biodiversity and what the risks we face, and also where the opportunities are. And in 2023, we established a dedicated biodiversity group. We gathered the colleagues from various departments and taking charge of the nature actions, and reporting regularly to our corporate sustainability committee. We have also developed a biodiversity policy and a no deforestation commitment with targets to achieve a net positive impact and zero net deforestation by 2040. And our nature actions span across forests, soil, and oceans. Since 2007, we have supported a world-class tropical and subtropical plant conservation center. Also, at our quarries, we are restoring native vegetation, aiming to recover these sites to the pre-mining ecological state. And speaking of what's under the trees, in the past year, we conducted a pioneer study on soil biodiversity and carbon sequestration at our Heping quarry. On the ocean side, we also initiated our first coral restoration project at the cement port, and we have successfully restored over 1,000 corals and expanded the restored area by 4 times comparing to 2021. When we will keep pushing deeper into our nature positive actions and stand with nature. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. Impressive progress. I look forward to hearing more about that. And I will remember that nature is the sine qua non for life on Earth. This was a nice one to leave us with. Ria, over to you. Would you tell us about the motivation behind Olam Food Ingredients nature
Sure.
strategy?
Sure, Angela. Thank you very much first of all, to you and Business for Nature for inviting me and the Olam Food Ingredients. Happy to share our journey. So Olam Food Ingredients, very quickly, is a global food and ingredients company. We have 5 key product platforms: cocoa, coffee, spices, nuts, and dairy. And last, what I've heard is that every 5th chocolate that anyone eats, the cocoa beans come from our network of farms. So we work like across 50 countries with 2.5 million farmers in our direct and indirect supply chain. So with all that background, I think it's very evident how and that nature journey is very important for us. And the nature journey is actually very deeply embedded in our purpose, which is to be the change for good food and healthy future. We recognize that nature and biodiversity are at the heart of sustainable agriculture, and which is why we have taken a proactive approach to integrate nature in our choices for change, which is our sustainability strategy, which we recently launched last year. But coming back to the motivation part, Angela, the motivation stems from 2 key drivers, very simply. As a global food and ingredients company, we depend on natural ecosystem and smallholder farmers for resilient supply chains. So addressing any nature-related risk isn't just about responsibility, it's about really ensuring our long-term business viability. So, and secondly, our stakeholders, be it our customers, larger society, our investors, they are increasingly engaging with us on this vital topic of nature positive outcomes, and making it imperative for us to really embed nature in our policies, in our decision making, in our internal decision making, most importantly. So yes, I think it really, I think it comes easy. That responsibility doesn't come easy, but that our dependency on natural capital, on nature comes really, it's a very evident dependency there. And that really motivates us. But like I said, it's not just a responsibility, it's a business imperative for us.
Thank you, Ria. That's very compelling. I look forward to diving a little bit deeper into your supply chain. And I'll actually start with you. So for the audience, we're going to go through some questions that will follow the structure of the active framework so that you can get a bit of an illustration of how these different actions materialize in the 3 companies that we have present today. So Ria, if we start with you on the assess action, can you tell us a little bit more about the data-driven approach that you've taken to your maturity assessment across your value chain? And also if you have any tools or innovations that you could share that have helped you succeed in this endeavor.
Yeah, sure. So the ACD framework has been very instrumental in really shaping the way we work. And I think it's a very useful framework for companies to really look at. And when we really, and I think we started with ACD first, but recently also then started looking at from a leap, the locate, evaluate, and the assess and perform the TNFD leap process and ACD, taking it together and ensuring we have a very holistic approach to how we deal with it, because I don't think anybody will find nature very straightforward. It's really about embracing the complexities of nature. It's not easy. We have started small, with our small scope, understanding what's important. So when it comes to assess, yes, you're right. So for us, it's the data-driven insights, which are assessing nature risk is grounded on the data-driven insights and the direct engagement with farming communities, because data doesn't evolve from anywhere else. It needs to evolve from people who we are working with, where the nature is really getting impacted, where our dependencies are actually emanating from. So that's really on the ground, directly engaging with those farming communities because they know best. So we leverage tools. So tools could be platforms, which are external platforms, which I think people here might know, like from Incor. Somebody mentioned Incor, which is good for dependency. Then we have many other tools, which I will share about. But I think if you go how we looked into assessed and come to risk and opportunities. So in that assess phase, it's very important, I think, for any company to really start with your impacts and dependencies and really understanding what are your impact and dependency on nature. But now if somebody asks me that you have such a global presence, where do you start with? Is it Cote d'Ivoire? It's Nigeria? Is it cocoa? Is it, let's say, spices in India? Where? So really you need to understand first, what are those sensitive areas? We need to assess those biodiversity hotspots, for which we use something called IBAT, Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool. So that could be a biodiversity hotspot, which really helps you to understand whether your operations are somewhere operating closer to protected areas or biodiversity key areas or high conservation forest areas. Similarly, you can look into your water stressed regions. Again, you need to filter down where you need to focus on. And that's what the beauty of SS phase is. You understand what are those water stressed regions. One of the external tool that we used, which I think is very common, is WRI's Aqueduct Water Risk Atlas. For that, you can use to understand your water stress. But again, keep having that engagement with the local community teams because they know best the situation on the ground. Then I think one key, I would say, the risk which we need to assess first is on the deforestation history of the regions we are operating in. And cocoa, coffee, like anyone know, has a big history of deforestation, and that is something we need to tackle. And that's what is one of our key areas under biodiversity and ecosystem. So once you understand what are those really regions, what are those your entities that you need to focus on, then look at your impact. What is your impact on land use change, your soil pollution, your water impact? You can have different impact drivers. And like I spoke about agriculture and nature, the dependency part, how dependent are you? Like for us, let's say pollination, ecosystem services. Without pollination, I don't think the crops will survive. We need pollination, right? We need right soil health and everything. So doing that, and then slowly you move to risk and opportunity. So that's what I have learned in my journey. Like, okay, you really need to look at, you need to distill down and then look at your impacts and dependencies. And from that, you can, then look into, then you can really identify what are your key risk and opportunities rather than boiling the entire ocean. And so I already spoke about the deforestation risk assessment, but just to give a few example of tools for a deforestation risk assessment is Global Forest Watch. So we use Global Forest Watch Pro, which is a platform which helps us. But again, we started earlier with a very radius kind of a farmer, like a farm as a radius approach. We slowly moved into a polygon mapping. So a lot of digital advances, a lot of satellite imagery, remote sensing use, really if you want to track near real-time alerts, if we want to put up in our direct supply chains. So it's a mix of a lot of things. Water risk assessment I just spoke about. Then, of course, the IBAT. So all of these are the tools I will say that helps us. But again, I will say these are external tools. We also have internal tools that we have developed. I would like to share also in the link maybe on the @source. So @source is, as the name says, at source, at that particular farm, what is your impact? So that really is will give you your entire supply chain impact metrics. And then what you can do is that when you work with the farmers to adjust their fertilizer use, to adjust their whatever practices, crop residue management, how they really apply pesticides, and how they reduce all this. So we need to let them know about the good agriculture practices. What is it that they can do to lower their biodiversity and ecosystem impact? And then in the @Source platform, you can see everything in terms of impact numbers. So this is more about assess phase. But again, another step, which I think I always mention, is that we have also done, Angela, is on the natural capital accounting. So natural capital accounting is when you really understand your impacts and dependencies. Can you really bring them into an impact valuation form? What does it mean in dollar terms? If you're regenerating farming practices in your different lands, you're bringing regen ag into it, regenerative agriculture into it. What does it really mean? What is that value of ecosystem services that you have restored? Or because of any land use change, historical deforestation, what is that social cost of carbon that has been created? So we are trying to advance, but taking our small steps, but really understanding it. So that's where the ACT-D framework helped, and the assess part was very important.
Thank you, Ria. That was very rich. Maybe we can share some of these tools in the chat. So I noted Anchor for the impact dependencies, IBAT, WWF risk, water risk assessment, as well as the Global Forest Watch's external tools. And then you had some internal tools as well with the @Source platform. So thank you so much for sharing all these, Ria, with us. Let's stay a little bit longer on the assess element of the active framework. Now I'll go over to you, Alvin. Could you tell us a little bit about TCC's group with a big focus on R&D as well as collaborative partnerships, and how that has helped you identify risk and opportunities, but also let's spend a little bit of time on the opportunities side as well.
Okay, thank you. So when it comes to assessing the nature risks and opportunities, we indeed rely heavily on our partnership with our stakeholders. So we collaborate with experts, scholars, and non-government organizations and the industry groups to gather reliable data and insights. And this guides our decision-making process. For example, the forest and carbon survey give us the key information of our query, and we can, based on that, to improve our strategies. And similarly, the soil biodiversity studies show that the soil invertebrates are coming back to our quarry after restoration. And this boosts our confidence in the quarry rehabilitation efforts. And the data not only help us set strategies, but also contribute to the analyzation as well. So in our TNFD report, we totally identified 10 risks and 12 opportunities. And at TCC, we see this risk as potential opportunity. So for instance, one of our risks is the shortage of natural resources. And at the same time, we spotted a market opportunity in nature-friendly products. So to address both of these, we are reducing our use of raw materials and fossil fuel to create sustainable products. And this lowers the risk of shortage while opening sales opportunities for sustainable products. And we've also brought nature-based solutions into our operations to unlock more possibilities. In 2023, our low-carbon products made up 37% of our total revenue, showing this financial impact of this approach. And we have kept investing in alternative raw materials, alternative fuels, renewable energy, and programs to cut water use and waste. This reduces our reliance on nature while creating positive outcomes. And in fact, we calculated that these efforts have saved us for around $83 million. And our focus on research and development and collaboration with stakeholders give us the tool to understand nature better and manage risks while growing our business sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. I really like that that example of how you've turned one of your 10 nature risks into opportunities. We do tend to forget the linkages between both. Wonderful. So now we're going to move on to the next stage of the active framework, which is commit. And we're going to come back to you, Ankit, on that one. You've introduced earlier the Planet Positive sustainability strategy that you released in August 2024, last year, if I'm not mistaken. And that strategy has a big focus on water security. So could you tell us a little bit more about why you've identified that as one of your areas for big commitments and what you are expecting to come from the commitments in that space?
Sure. Thank you, Angela. So on water commitment, as I was saying that we at a group level have basically committed to becoming 100% water positive. And this is actually something that we have already achieved since 2014. So it's been almost 11 years that we have been a water positive company at the group level. But what we are now trying to also do is that not just limit it at the group level, because we have certain kind of businesses which are good for the environment in terms of water. So one in particular is a business called drip irrigation. What it does is that it provides solutions for farmers to be able to grow their crops. Typically, in industries such as grapes and any kind of mangoes, any kind of fruits in particular, but also more water intense crops such as sugarcane, etc., which allows them to grow the crop with much lesser quantity of water. So given the presence of that business, and separately, we also historically have been running a major CSR program on watershed development, which basically works with farmers in the rural community to promote conservation of water, especially rainwater harvesting, through making of some local structures, etc., local ponds, cleaning them, maintaining them, creating awareness around those issues. So these two initiatives together have ensured that we recycle and recharge more groundwater than the amount of water that we consume. But now what we are trying to do is ensure that not just at a group wide level, but also at a location by location level, we are water positive. So for instance, our auto business is about 18 different factories. So how can we ensure that each of these factories standalone is also has a water positive operation? We have about 50 different resorts, again, some in water scarce regions, some in different parts of the country. So making sure that each of these resorts also are water positive. So that's what we are progressing on in this journey. The third part that I also briefly touched upon in my earlier answer is that there is a direct impact that we create on the water ecosystem, but what we are also trying to do is share many of our learnings with the wider ecosystem of our suppliers, specifically in the manufacturing sector, that all the best practices that we have, how can we take it to our suppliers for them to replicate that as well, and sort of not just share the best practices, but also incentivize them to work on it. So when it comes to our supplier evaluation, there is a certain amount of let's say marks that's given to them based on their performance on certain environmental parameters, water being one of them. The other area that which is a bit indirectly connected is with respect to sustainable agriculture. So again, we have different parts of our businesses, and I'll take two examples in particular. One is that we sell rice seeds. Now, rice is generally speaking a very water intense crop. So the new variant of rice seeds that we have typically require about 15% less water. So that's something that we are promoting. Similarly, we also sell potato seeds or potato bulbs. So there also the new variants that we are promoting require relatively less water. Then we, through our farm equipment business, we also sell different types of farm equipment. There also we are promoting both machinery and techniques, especially in the rice cultivation ecosystem, which require less water. So there are these indirect effects also, especially in the agri ecosystem, which will require farmers to use lesser quantity of water. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Ankit. That's a holistic approach to water stewardship while tackling the problem from all different angles. It was a wonderful example. Thank you for sharing that with us. So that was an illustration of the power of targets and ambitious targets under commit. And now we're going to go into disclose. And so for that one, Alvin, I'll come back to you with an example from TCC Group. So what are the drivers for you to disclose your nature performance? Can you share some of the frameworks and methodologies that are guiding your approach without using too many acronyms, if possible, or spelling them out for the audience? Thank you, Edwin.
Okay, so at TCC, we disclose our nature performance for a few reasons. First of all, it helps us to review what we are doing now and find way to keep improving. So disclosing nature performance is not just about looking back, it's about pushing ourselves forward. And secondly, sharing this information is a vital way for us to connect with our stakeholders, the customers, investors, and communities. For example, when we share our data on water usage or carbon reduction, our stakeholders can see how seriously we take our role in protecting nature. And by being transparent, we show them that our nature efforts is more than just slogans. It's backed by real and solid actions. So to report our nature-related metrics, we follow international frameworks. We use the TNFD guidance and the GRI standards to shape our approach. And this year, we've also started to align with the European Union's European Sustainability Reporting Standards, ESRS framework, and which adds more indicators to our current disclosures and keep us in step with global expectations. And at the regional level, we work with the China Building Materials Federation indicators. And since we are part of the cement industry, we are currently follow the Global Cement and Concrete Association's sustainable guidelines. And all this framework give us the clear structure to measure and share our progress with our stakeholders. So we are expecting to expanding our disclosure scope this year. And this will now cover our cement business units in Taiwan, China, Europe, and Turkey. And by doing this, we can provide our stakeholders with the fuller picture of our efforts across different regions. And beyond the reporting, we are also want to be proactive as well. So this year, we have begun studying the Science-Based Target Network, SBTN, to set meaningful targets for nature. And it's about taking responsibility and planning ahead. So we will keep refining our actions and moving forward.
Super, thank you, Alvin. If you have a second, I would encourage all of you actually to go look in the Q&A section of the chat at the bottom. There's a few questions in there for the audience that you might have a chance to address. And so now that we've heard about disclosing, we wanted to move on to the transform, the T of the active framework. And for this one, I'll come back to you, Ankit, and then Ria, to you as well. We've heard before that companies are still prioritizing climate over nature, and the nature agenda is trailing a little bit behind climate, although it is climbing on the political and corporate agenda. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've gone about getting your internal stakeholders on board with your nature agenda?
Sure, Angela. So I'll start with a slightly higher level answer here, in the sense that all climate, nature, biodiversity, ESG actions, etc. Generally, they can be categorized into three categories. One, things where the business case and especially the financial case is very strong. So anything such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, those are often very easy to get going. It's all about scaling at pace. The second category of actions are often which are driven by regulation. Again, relatively easy because there's a regulatory requirement and you sort of run behind them at pace. It's often the third category where the business case is not, as obvious, or it's a slightly more longer term risk, or it's a longer term opportunity, or some sort of a positive outcome, but not in a short frame. Those are often the areas where you need to rally a lot more support. So I think across all kinds of activities, and especially when it comes to nature and biodiversity activities, etc., in the third bucket in particular, what really helps is first helping develop the broader understanding on the subject, because many of these areas are not not themes that a lot of senior stakeholders, including the CEOs or board members, have really engaged with during their operating time. So a big focus of our work, and including the biodiversity policy for Mahindra, which has been signed by a group MD himself, was involved, engaging with him in a lot more depth around what is biodiversity, what does it mean, what does it mean for business, why is it worth investing, what is the investor view on the subject, etc. And then subsequently coming up with concrete areas of action which are more meaningful for the business. Now, the other lens that I would really encourage folks here on the webinar to bring in is that not every business will have the same layer of engagement. So when it comes to the this subject, let's say any business which is in the food value chain, so cocoa prices have been going up, mango prices have been going up. When it comes to our finance business, the fact that if farmers don't make money, driven by different implications of nature, the loan NPAs will go up. So showing the correlation with the business, either in terms of a risk or opportunity specifically to that business, customizing that, that I think is a very important aspect that really helps get wider stakeholder buy-in. So both, I would say, building continuous awareness on a variety of new developments, subject, regulation, investor view, etc. And second, making it very real by bringing in a business element to the conversation. So that's what I think has really helped us penetrate a better understanding, and subsequently more actions across the ecosystem. Happy to share more tangible examples, but I think maybe I'll pause in the interest of time.
Thank you, Ankit. So really the importance of tying it to the material risk and opportunities of the individual business units or sectors in which you operate. So that's very good advice. So Ria, back to you. At the start, we asked you about the motivations behind your nature journey, and you mentioned that one of them was the long-term resilience of your business. And so we'd love to bring that to life a little bit. If you could share some examples of how your actions around nature action, around your nature strategy, have contributed to increasing the resilience of food ingredients.
Yeah, sure, Angela. So we have our nature strategy is part of our wider sustainability impact strategy, which I just mentioned. So we last year launched Choices for Change, which is a sustainability impact strategy, and within which it focuses on 4 interconnected pillars, from prosperous farmers, thriving communities, climate action, and regenerating the living world, all built over the common foundation of supply chain excellence. And it's the regenerating the living world where we have put in and enhanced our biodiversity, nature, and ecosystem health within our agricultural landscapes. I was just sharing the link to the same strategy as well. But coming back to the question on resilience, because I think whatever actions we are doing here is really, it's really for the resilience and long-term sustainability and the viability of the business. So under that, we are still, I think we are still maturing. We are still trying to figure out what could be the right targets that are linked to our dependencies, that are linked to our impacts. But it's sometimes become a little tricky also because biodiversity is not same across all regions, all countries, for all crops and commodities. So it's very difficult to bring, what are those common targets? Otherwise, we'll have so many targets. But we are starting small. We are starting, and we have few targets that we have put in place, which are like over-encompassing all our different product platforms. One of that which we thought is very important is that by 2030, bringing 2 million hectares under regenerative agriculture practices. And I think just to examine on the regen agriculture. So regen agriculture is really where our resilience is tied with. So really it involves techniques that restore soil health, improves water cycles, increase biodiversity, ensuring that we are actually investing in our current ecosystem, in our current natural capital, so that in future we have more resilient farming systems. So that is one example that I can say, which is again tied to our target. So we have a target and we are doing things on the ground. At the same time, what's important for us is also agroforestry, which is also a part of Region Ag. But we have a target around by 2030, I think 25 million trees distributed for agroforestry. Agroforestry is not, it's like for, it's like, of course, it's like intercropping, rather, you have different trees along with different types of species of trees along with your crops. But this also helps in productivity. Like if your cocoa trees are planted with some shade trees of different fruits, then your productivity increases. It's more of like a shade trees. But at the same time, it also helps in bringing the larger ecosystem services to life, restoring it, and making it really, from a resilient point of view, active. So those are few examples I can share, but it's really 4 or 5 things which I thought I can share from a business examples perspective. First is, of course, promoting conservation on and around farms, like what I said with agroforestry, access to rural credit for the farmers so that they really get the right credit to really advance on these technologies and different good agriculture practices, planting materials and other things. And one thing is very important is from a business example is that we need to really work towards ending deforestation. So a lot of emphasis goes there. In fact, every week, I think we have discussions around how we get best geospatial technology. Are we doing this right? Can we work with, XYZ different technological partners to really progress on the work we are doing? We really want to monitor, have a polygon mapping of our farms to ensure that we have end-to-end traceability. And why I keep saying about deforestation is I think a lot of us are aware of EUDR, the European deforestation regulation coming in. It's very important for us. So it's resilience, it's compliance, it's really our something that we cannot, it's non-negotiable in short. So promoting a region ag approach is important, generating, also working on something called living landscape. So it's not just about focusing on some farms and with the farmers. It's sometimes really about coming up with a living landscape approach, understanding the wider landscape, working with different stakeholder partnerships to scale up the programs beyond just farms. And of course, bringing that all together through natural capital accounting to really understand. And I think what the point to Ankit also it mentioned is a very good point, that how all of this really makes business sense. What is the value that has been eroded or created with this work? That's what the company wants to know, the business wants to know, so that we can really come up with that true value the company is creating.
Yeah, thank you, Ria. This is really bringing it to life. Before we move into Q&A and also for the participants, I encourage you to keep dropping your questions in the chat. Ria, would you just share a word of advice for a company wanting to start or advance on their nature strategy? What would be your key advice?
Yeah, I don't want to reiterate again, but the same thing that nature is not just a responsibility and a compliance kind of a thing. It's becoming business imperative. And it's just that once you start looking at your impacts and dependencies, you'll really realize how important it is. So start by embedding nature in your core strategy, like what we did, sustainability strategy, where, we have presented it to our CEO, to our board, and really that's the business sustainability strategy, not like a side initiative. Use data-driven insights because data is gold now. All your decision-making power is everything relies on data, measure impact. So I think the key to success is to start now, right now, adapt and ensure that nature is your a driver to your business success and not just a trade-off. Yeah.
Super, thank you. We want to make sure we leave enough time for the questions from the audience. So I might just quickly go through my chat and see which questions have gone through. Just give me a second. Okay. Okay, so I have a question for you, Ankit. So let me read it out for you. Listen carefully. So financing biodiversity conservation is still a major challenge for conservationists. Do you have insights on how business can play a role to make sure the needed funding is channeled to biodiversity conservation initiatives, such as land and marine protected areas? Are you comfortable answering this question, Ankit, or would you prefer that I dig up another one?
No, no, absolutely very happy to answer that. So I'm going to answer
Okay.
that with an example first. So Mahindra Group over the last 15 years has planted about 25 million trees. And now that obviously required a certain amount of funding. And this came from our CSR program. So by law, most Indian companies are mandated to spend about 2% of their profit for certain societal benefits. And now planting trees does not really qualify as a societal benefit directly, but the way the program was designed, that it met both environmental and societal outcomes together. So the entire plantation was done with tribal community in coffee in regions of India where coffee is grown. And then over a period of time, the model was developed in such a way that that it became self-sustainable, wherein the farmers were able to improve the yield of the coffee that they produced with the help of the fruit trees and a lot of other regenerative agriculture practices that was also sort of taught to them. And that model now is working in a manner that it's become a brand of its own called Araku Coffee, sold both in India and around the world. So the way I would look at it is that sometimes most companies would typically have this sort of a philanthropic grant that they provide, but the way to use them often is to try and see that as a starter and try and build models where it becomes self-sufficient over a period of time. That's one. The second model that often is helpful is if you are able to work with the community to create a case for carbon credits, which can then be monetized again by the same business itself or otherwise. So, especially in ecosystems where you're not directly involved. So, for instance, this is not something that we have done directly yet, but we are in early stages of exploration. But a few other companies have explored this, where they are working with the agri community and trying to generate carbon credits through better agricultural practices by improving the soil carbon content of the soil. So there, then they are monetizing these credits, which in turn help with the business. But at the same time, the reason business is funding it because it also helps with the increase in productivity. So you create a business case for some investments to come into it, but at the same time, you also find alternate sources of revenue. This is something that the third one, actually maybe a third example I'll take is what we are doing with the AWD techniques of rice cultivation. So as I was talking earlier, there are different techniques in rice cultivation, both direct seeding of rice and alternate wetting and drying of rice, which help with promotion, which help with lesser amount of water being used. Now, for those kind of products, what we have done is that we sell equipment that is used in direct seeding of rice. So using some of the marketing budget, we are trying to pick up initiatives on ground where we are handholding the farmers to absorb these practices and learn from each other. And then there's a marketing case that if farmers adopt these kind of practices, so they'll buy this machinery. So the sort of summary point that I'll basically add is that both philanthropic funding, alternate sources of revenue by building a business case, and marketing budgets to some extent wherever there's a strong business case are the 3 or 4 sources of revenue you'll have to find within the companies to get things going.
Super. Thank you so much, Ankit. I think we have time for one last question. Alvin, this is for you. Listen carefully. Sorry, I'm just yeah, okay. So we wanted to come back to the TNFD. You mentioned that you were a TNFD adopter. That's the Task Force for Nature Financial Disclosures. The TNFD has been in place for over a year. And what has been your opinion based on its efficiency and effectiveness?
Okay, so this is I saw this in the box, right? Okay.
Sorry? Yeah, I think it was a question that you probably answered already in the Q&A. And
Okay.
I think the audience was interested in hearing your answer to that one.
Yeah. So I think that TNFD is really a good framework to help business to evaluate the nature dependencies and impacts. And after you can know the dependence and impacts, you can go assess your risks and opportunity. So that TFD even offer the sector guidance for specific industry to know their risks and opportunities. And after you know the risks and opportunity, you can start to action based on these risks. So TMD is very important to help business to know what are their risks and what is the opportunity, and to set strategies. So I think it's very helpful.
Thank you so much, Alvin. Thank you to all three of you. Ankit, Ria as well, for showing all your insights. Please continue going through the questions in the Q&A section. I think there's still a few that you might be able to answer. And without further ado, I'm going to hand back over to Pallavi to walk us through the last section of the webinar. A warm thank you for all your insights.
Thank you so much, everyone. So this also brings us to the end of our webinar. I see a lot of questions and we haven't been able to answer all of them, but I promise we'll get back to you on that and we'll try and share with the panelists these questions. I hope that you found the inspiration to begin or continue your nature journey after hearing the experiences from all the three companies. We'll be sharing all the case studies and the slides, all the material present today via email later on. So don't worry about that in case you have not managed to click on any of the links. So thank you once again, and thank you to all our speakers, Angela, for moderating such a wonderful conversation, and most importantly, thank you to all our wonderful audience, and I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much.